Hey everybody, this is Dream, and we have a 12-game slate today. It was originally 13, but the Orlando game has been moved up, so it's not in this particular slate now. You'll notice that the players are redded out on DraftKings, not to use those guys. There's no game, so make sure not to use those guys. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It really helps the channel. I really do appreciate it. Also, share this video if you like it. Let's go ahead and get into the injury report today. For the Pacers, Duarte is out. For the Hornets, Hayward is out. For the Jazz, Vanderbilt is questionable. For the Hawks, Young is questionable. For the Knicks, Robinson is out. For the Nets, Irving is out. For the Rockets, Fernando and Tate are both out. For the Raptors, Siakam is out. For the Pelicans, Nance is questionable. For the Bulls, Drummond is questionable and White is out. For the Suns, Cam Johnson is out and Chris Paul is questionable. For the Bucks, Drew Holiday is doubtful. For the Thunder, Pokusevski is questionable. For the Grizzlies, Adams is questionable. For the Spurs, Collins is out and McDermott is questionable. For the Lakers, LeBron and Davis are both probable and Lonnie Walker is questionable. For the Clippers, Kawhi Leonard is out. And for the Kings, Malik Monk is questionable. So overall, we got a lot of injuries today as we're getting used to on this particular season so far. Just tons of injuries across the league. Having the day off yesterday did help, I think, some teams at least, and nobody's on a back-to-back, so that's definitely nice in this case. So let's go ahead and get into the players. Now, this is definitely a guard-heavy slate when it comes to pricing on DraftKings. The guards are much better priced than forwards and centers are. So there's quite a few guards I like. So I'm gonna go ahead and say and recommend that you utilize utility for guard with a guard because I think guards are really gonna pay off today. With that said, let's get into those. So first we got Darius Garland for Cleveland against Sacramento. Now his price point is pretty solid. He's only played 4 games, but he's 5x in the last 3. As long as he's getting over 35 minutes, he's going to be able to play well here. And this is going to be a pace-up game for Cleveland, with Sacramento being a very pace-friendly and lacking defensive team. Then we're going to look at Terry Rozier for the Hornets. He is $7,800. His price is pretty much stabilized here, and in 3 of the games he's done extremely well. The last game he didn't get as many peripheral stats as he's normally getting against Washington, so that is a little bit of a concern. But overall, his price point is still pretty good for a guy that's going to be playing 35 plus minutes and usually scores in the 20 to 25 point range. He should be able to 5x at this in this spot, especially if he can, if he can get some of the peripheral stats up a little bit. Then we're going to look at Van Vliet here for Toronto. He is in a good spot here with Siakam still out. He's a big focal point of the offense for White right now. He was even with Siakam playing. This is a better matchup than the last couple games where he still did extremely well against Chicago. So I expect him to have a big game here. And, he's going to be able to score 25 to 30 regular points in this one at the very least. And he does get a lot of good peripheral stats as well, so I do like him in this matchup. Then we're going to look at Cade Cunningham for Detroit. Now, this is a tougher matchup against Boston, but he's been pretty much matchup proof for the most part this season. He's had big games against Milwaukee and Atlanta and the Knicks. I mean, even Orlando. Usually teams that are pretty tough on guards like him, but he's been pretty solid, and his price points actually dropped down some, which makes him much more viable on the slate because he does have 50-point upside, and even though it is a tough matchup, he has been playing extremely well. Then we're going to look at Tyrese Halliburton, whose price point has come up a little bit, but he is still just the top-tier option for that team. This is a pretty good matchup for him. Obviously, Jamal Murray's a decent defensive player, but Murray's not playing a full complement of minutes most of the time, and Halliburton's been pretty much matchup-proof. He's done great against teams that have been good against guards so far this season. He's only had one really bad game, which was the second game against Brooklyn. But overall, he's just in a great spot, and he's going to have a lot of scoring opportunities in this one. Then we're going to look at Jordan Clarkson. See here for Utah. Now, this is an interesting matchup, especially if Trae Young is out. He's been playing around 30 minutes a game, and he's been hitting pretty high numbers pretty consistently, actually, for the Jazz. Their guard situation there in Utah is actually pretty. I mean, there's 3 guys that take up a lot of the minutes, and which is Clarkson, Conley, and Sexton. But they're all playing really well, and quite frankly, I like all three of these guys today. They all have upside in this matchup, and especially Sexton is a little bit too cheap for the production he's been doing. His price has come up though, but all three of those guys are in play on this particular slate for Utah. Then we're going to look at Vassell for San Antonio Spurs. Now he's a guy you can actually put in the small forward section, which is nice here. He's been really good so far this season when he starts, and so we do want to make sure he starts because he hasn't been starting all the games. But if he starts, he usually gets over 32 or so minutes at least, and he's been able to be really good in those situations. And this is a good match. This is a little bit of a tough matchup against Memphis, but he's been pretty good when he does start, so just make sure he's starting. Buddy Hield's another guy that can play small forward as well. He's playing a full complement of minutes, nearly 40 minutes a night, and he's been absolutely dominating the last few games. Him and Halliburton seem to have really hit a nice smooth area here, and his price point is just way too cheap for what he's been doing. I expected to see his price point in the 7,000 range today, but it's only at 6,400, so he's a great play on this particular slate. Then we're going to look at Jaden Ivey for Detroit, another guy against Boston here, but he's been pretty consistent this season, and his price is pretty fair for what he's been doing. He's had some rough games, but most of that is just been in games where Detroit has been blown out. And I don't really necessarily see this game as a huge blowout risk. It does have some risk, I guess, but it's also some of those games that they've got blown out were back-to-backs, and so I expect him to do pretty decent in this matchup. Then we're going to look at Jalen Green here for Houston against Toronto. He should be able to play a full complement of minutes here. Probably going to have to play a lot, honestly, with some of the injuries and stuff to this team. And he's been playing pretty solid. He had a couple games where he didn't play quite as good, but now he's getting back into the swing, and as long as he's starting, he's going to be a pretty good focal point of their offense, and he's got opportunity to score a lot of points. He shoots the ball a ton. It's just a matter of him shooting the ball well and hitting threes and stuff like that. Then we're going to look at Scotty Barnes here for Toronto. Now he's got a matchup here against Houston. And the last game he kind of had a letdown, but that was in a back-to-back, and so I don't really hold that against him too much. This is a game where they should bounce back and have a dominant play against Houston, and look for him to have a big game as a result. Same goes with OG Anunoby. He had a little bit of a down game against the second game of Chicago, but again, I mean, Chicago's a pretty good defensive team a lot of times, and in a back-to-back situation like that, sometimes a little letdowns happen. But that said, this is a good prime spot for him to bounce right back and get back to what he was doing. Now, his price point has shot up quite a bit, so that is a little bit of a concern, but he's still a decent play at this price point. Then we're going to look at Royce O'Neal here for Brooklyn. Now, he's been playing really good with Kyrie Irving out, and so I expect him to continue to play a ton of minutes as a result. And he's a much safer option than a guy like Joe Harris, who's really pretty inconsistent. Then we're going to look at Keldon Johnson for the Spurs. He's in a tough spot here against Memphis, but he's been playing extremely well. He's been basically matchup proof throughout the season, scoring points and buckets. He's not as big of a peripheral stat guy sometimes, but overall he's been scoring enough regular points where he hasn't had to do a ton in some games, and then when he does, he has 50-point type games. So it's just a matter of it's just a matter of him getting some extra peripheral stats and stuff, which he does tend to do. He's got plenty of shot opportunities in this one, and if they can keep it close, then this will be a game where he can really play out. Obviously, Memphis is a team that plays pretty hard and plays well, but he has some opportunity in this one. And then Giannis, he is probable to play, actually not questionable like this says. And Drew Holiday may be out, and if that's the case, then he's going to be in play, even at his insane price point. It's actually bananas how expensive he is. But again, he's Giannis, and aside from like having a foul trouble game or something like, or the Bucks just getting blown out, he's going to have some good opportunity here, especially if Drew Holiday is out. Then we're going to look at Bobby Portis, another guy for Milwaukee. Now he's kind of in the same situation where he's going to get more minutes if Drew is out. As a result, even though I know that doesn't make a ton of sense necessarily, but it does if you look at his minutes in the past and stuff like that. when Drew sits out. He's going to have more opportunity, to play. And it seems like he's starting to get more minutes offside of Brook Lopez as well anyway. So he's not a great play if Drew Holiday plays, but he's a decent play if Drew Holiday sits. And his price point isn't that bad still. He's been pretty solid this season. He's been a little bit inconsistent, but this is a good matchup for him, and I expect him to play a lot of minutes in this one. Then we're going to look at Zion Williamson against Chicago. Now, this is a little bit of a tougher matchup against Vucevic, but I think he's going to have a good opportunity here to have a good game. And his price point is still a little bit too cheap for what I expect his price to be throughout the season. Mostly that's just because sometimes he gets into where he gets gimpy and so he doesn't play as many minutes, which is an irritating thing about him. But if he doesn't get gimpy, then he's a really good play. And then Aaron Gordon for Denver. He looks like he's in a really good spot here for the Nuggets. He's actually a little bit too cheap. I typically don't like to play him because he has tendency to have like a 10 fantasy point game, but his price point has dropped off pretty good. Probably the lowest I've seen him this season, and that makes him kind of playable and kind of a plus matchup. Obviously, Miles Turner is a good defensive player, but he has been playing well in a lot of games this season, and when he does play well, he usually goes way above his 5x requirement. Then for centers, we're going to look at Miles Turner here for Indiana. Indianapolis, for Indiana. His price point has stayed virtually the same so far this season. Obviously, he didn't play to start the year, but since he started playing, he's been very inconsistent, but his price point is cheap enough that he is worth taking a look at here. And even though Denver does have a tough defensive team, especially in the paint with the Joker, he still has some upside in this matchup. He even did well against Miami, and he did okay against Chicago in limited minutes. So I do expect him to have a good opportunity in this matchup. Then we're looking at DeAndre Ayton. Now the risk with him is that sometimes he doesn't play deep in the game. As you can see, the minutes are all over the place the last few games. He's also been hurt a couple times, so we do have to take that in consideration. But if Chris Paul is out, him and Booker will definitely be the top tier guys, and so he's going to be an interesting option on this particular slate because of that, potentially with Paul out. And then Sengun for Houston against Toronto. He's been playing super solid as a starter. You just got to make sure he's starting, and if he does, then he's been playing really good. And while his price point has come up a little bit, he's still in a good spot. And even though it's a kind of tough matchup against Toronto, Siakam's not playing, and so I do like him on the slate. And then Brook Lopez for Milwaukee. His minutes have kind of come down a little bit since the start of the season, and his production is kind of way well off. But I still think he's in a pretty good spot here, especially if Drew Holiday doesn't play. He'll have to take more shots. And so he's somebody that's kind of interesting, but he's not super ideal because of his price point, but he still has some upside as a result. With that said, guys, thank you guys for liking, commenting, subscribing. Obviously, there are some injury things that we're going to have to take a look at. Let me figure out what my core plays are here real quick. Definitely Vassell if he starts. Buddy Hield as well. And then also, I think Darius Garland here are going to be my core plays. So at this point, now that is subject to change as a result of the potential, that we have coming through the rest of the slate and with the injury situations as they get figured out. But overall, it's a pretty interesting slate. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. And have a nice day, guys.